had known only since 2017. We met at Tempe at that festival, is a distinguished former pupil of the Matthay pupil, Julian Degray, and that's her connection to us, I suppose. And she's a well-known composer and was a Fulbrighter in Germany for composition, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Not piano.
And well, also a music executive and a dancer. Was you a dancer at some point too?
Well, I am a tap dancer.
You're just a dancer for fun. Okay. So she is an accomplished woman, and we're delighted to have her.
Thank you. I think, given that this is a raked stage, or a raked room, if you don't mind, I'll talk in the seating position. I wanted to come to speak about Julian Degray and to present his ideas. And as you have noticed, that 3 master teachers are being recognized: John Barry, and Stewart, and Aiko Oishi. And I want to present Julian Degray to you because I think he's not that well known. He was a student of Tobias Matthay in the late 20s, and as Stephen Seek has described in his wonderful book about Tobias Matthay, Julian, as the Second World War was ending, he was in Stockholm, took a detour coming home to the United States and went to visit his teacher and mentor, and had, I don't know if you'd call it a lesson, but had the last session that is known with. That's just, it's not to put a blue ribbon on, it's just to say that his connection.
It went on for 3 days.
Yes.
I would call it a lesson.
Oh, I call it an odyssey. So Tobias Matthay encouraged his students to compose. I don't know how many of them did or how much they did, but I thought it would be, I wanted to start with this whole session with a piece of music that was composed to teach a student something, but first and foremost be a piece of music. I'll play it for you and then tell you a few things about it.
Liz, would you like the lid up?
I'm sorry?
Would you like the lid up?
No, I don't think so. This is not a concert. And it's a small room, but thanks for offering. The piece is called Prairie, and it was composed to help a young student who is sitting in the room. You have a copy of it. Did you see the handout? I'm sorry to interrupt myself, but you have a copy of Prairie in your handout, in most of the handouts. So this piece was written for my daughter Amy, who was studying with me. Actually, she came to me and asked me, she was about 8 and a half, if she could have piano lessons. And I had never thought I would be a piano teacher, but so I said, sure, of course you can have lessons. We'll pick a time and a date that's convenient for both of us. After a few lessons, I realized she wanted a real piano teacher, and not her mother. Her mother taught her good manners and excellent grammar, but piano lessons, she never connected me to doing that. So I decided I have to become a piano teacher. I knew the people who taught piano in Wilton, Connecticut, and I didn't want any of them to get their hands on my daughter, her ears. So I was pretty well known in that area of Fairfield County at the time. I was in the paper occasionally, I played in New York, and so I got a lot of students very quickly. And I found I had been studying quite a long time with Julian Degray at the time, and I'll tell you about that later. I found that there was not a lot of material, and indeed I had to buttress the material some way. And it was my habit, since I'm a composer, I'm accustomed to writing music very fast, and the students had score paper as their notebooks. So if there was a little technical problem, I would just write out a little exercise and say, do this every day, and how many times, and I would always say 25. So, hoping that they would do it 5 times. So Amy was having a problem with what we, I think, called rotation. Julian, by the way, did not use any terms, so I've picked them up by the by. So it was a 2-note phrase in the left hand. That kind of thing. And so I said, I'll write it out for you later, because we lived in the same house. I was on the road most of the day and thinking about this left hand, and I discovered, by the time I got home in the afternoon, I'd written a piece. And so later that evening, after I'd finished teaching, I have 3 children, and I gave them this supper. Their father came from New York quite late. And I took a piece of score paper and just wrote out the piece as I was talking to them. It's like taking dictation. Not musical, but it is music, of course it is. And at some point, Amy said, "What are you doing?" And she did not know that I wrote music. I mean, it is pretty silent. And so I said, "I'm writing a piece." "Oh, what is it?" I said, "Actually, it's for you." And after supper, we went into the living room. And because she asked me, "Can you play it?" And I said, "I don't know. I never have." So I went and played it. And as I was playing, I thought, what if she doesn't like it? And I finished. It's a short piece. And she said, "I like it. What's its name?" And I don't know where it came from, I said, "Prairie." So this prairie deals with this left hand. All through the piece, right? How much better to play a piece than to play an exercise, it seems to me. And the tune then gives the opportunity for shaping. And I think you have to start discussing that at this level, so that it becomes part of not only what the student plays, but more important, it becomes what the student hears. And if you don't hear it, you really don't play it. You can be directed to play it, but you really have to have it in your ear. Everything proceeds from the ear, after all. So the first phrase is a 3-bar. Imagine that 3-bar phrase. Up and down. There's no indication here. It just says piano. And then an answer. And then it goes on. Right? And then it goes longer. And this quietly leaves. Now, in the long 6-bar phrase, of course, you have a choice. And I think these are things you really must teach a student right away. It's because it's not window dressing, it's part of the piece. There are 2 E flats that it goes. Now as the next is the next one more intense or less? That's just a question. That is what you decide. And if you teach from the beginning to a student, you're not being directed, you're asked to make a decision, an informed decision, you can help. But I trust that you get the point, that all of this comes in a big package. So that piece became part of a published collection that George Schirmer published, I think, for about 35 years. There were 14 pieces, and I'm going to play a couple more later. Now I want to speak about Julian and play for you the first piece that I actually studied with him. I met Julian when I was 16. I was a freshman at Bennington College, and he taught there. And I knew him for the rest of his life. At Bennington, there were 3 people who taught piano: Claude Frank, Lionel Novak, and Julian. I never studied with Julian at Bennington. However, he was my counselor in my junior year, and in my senior year, I was invited by him to be part of his seminar, which was called Music and the Commonwealth of the Arts. And if you're thinking, la-di-da, that is a typical Bennington course title. It was a fascinating course. I should add, Bennington College was all women. Well, we really weren't women, we were girls. But anyway, it was all women, and the student body numbered 300. There were 60 on the faculty. 5 to 1 says that, that ratio says if you don't get a good education, you've been asleep. It was a big class at Bennington was 7, and there were lots of 2 and 3 people classes. I finished Bennington and went home to Dexter, Maine, and ran the Red Cross swimming program for 8 weeks. And then I went to a composers conference. I had written a great deal of music when I was at Bennington. I had been making up music since I was 4, so that was really not writing it down, just singing. That was 8 weeks, and for 2 weeks I went to a composers conference. There was a big conference there. I think you're all familiar with the having amateur chamber music players go for 2 weeks to some campus and study with professionals. The professionals also played for the composers, played everything that we brought. And it was just, one was suffused with the sound of music, all different kinds of sounds of music, and basically all really well played. And I went back to Dexter, Maine for about 2 weeks, and just my head full of sound. And I started writing a sonatina. Oh, thank you. Thank you, dear. Excuse me, I think that was a hint. I started writing a sonatina. I do not write. I have never written at the piano. So I was at my parents' dining room table writing this piece. And I went to New York to go to Columbia, to go to graduate school. And of course took the sonatina with me. The conference, the composers conference, was headed by a violinist whose name was Max Polikoff. Max Polikoff also ran a chamber music series in New York at the 92nd Street Y, which was a place where new music was often played. And I say chamber music, I mean mostly the ink wasn't dry on this music. He called me at Columbia University and said, he was, as I said, the head of this, I don't know if it's the imperial we, if we had friends, but he said, we have heard you have written a sonatina and we want you to play it on the next concert at the end of October. And one didn't say no to Max. Or I didn't know how to say no to Max, so I probably gulped and said yes, and asked for particulars. So I called Julian Now, bear in mind, I have been at Bennington for 4 years. I'd just come from this composers conference. We played everybody's music without question. Your music always got played. So I assumed that Julian would play my piece. And I visited him, and so I said, well, will you play this piece for me? It was finished by then, of course. And he said, no, but I will help you to play it yourself. I think I saw him twice. When you had, he said, this is not a lesson, these are not lessons, this is just a discussion between colleagues, or I'm helping you out. And a session with Julian was short if it was 2 hours. He was encyclopedic in many ways. And he did lead me through my piece, and basically what he did was he taught me the things that are taught by teachers here. And it was then, so this is 1953, and playing contemporary piano music very often consisted of sort of slash and bang, and the piano was regarded as a percussion instrument. And he said, but you have all these phrase markings. Now you have the score of the second movement of the sonatina. The handout is a little helter-skelter, but you do have the score of this piece. Because I thought it was, at the last minute I thought, oh, I can't just talk about it without your looking on to see what I'm talking about. So he pointed out all the marks of expression, all the marks of how to use the piano, and the accents and the shifts in dynamics. But he said it is very lyrical. I think I probably tried to play it for him at first. Anyway, so I'm going to sort of talk you through this piece. It only lasts 2.5 minutes. The talk will take a little longer than that. So it starts, as you can see, with the una corda pedal down. But it starts with this that little ornament. So he advised, do not put down the una corda pedal with the ornament, before the ornament, put it down with the G natural. So it starts like this, wide apart, right? There's a line. What is wrong with you? There's a single note. There is a 3-note chord. It happens to be B major in first inversion, but that's not useful here. So I'm going to play it a little louder. And Julian said, just because you have 3 notes, you don't have to play them all at the same volume, and probably should not. Indeed, the line is. So then when you get to this minor third, I'm sorry, I have it 1929 Bösendorfer. Not quite. So you make the line, and then all the ancillary notes are less. It's very simple. I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? And then the bass, you make a line. Now when you play, that's an octave. Do you play it, or do you play it, or do you play it? You have to decide. Everything has to proceed from here. How do you want it to sound? And how do you get that? And that is basically the way that he taught. And he taught all kinds of things, which we'll get into. I'm not going to be quite as granular, but I just want you to. So then it goes on. And the una corda pedal has been on, right? Now, it has a little figure. And very often there are 2 voices. And then there are these sort of arpeggiated figured. And if you look through the manuscript, you'll see this is 7, and later you have, down the 4th line, you have 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there are many of those, as you can just see by scanning the manuscript, many arpeggios, and there are, at the bottom of the first page, there's a 6 32nd note, so it's an 8th note basically, and it says non pedale, so it sounds, and it has, that's the sound, right? I know that sound is what I wanted to hear, that sort of little feathers coming off of the piano, and then you get sort of a tune, and now when it's this 3rd going to this 9th, maybe you, if you can, because it's a fairly big span, play less of the E flat. So as the piece goes along, on the 2nd page, there's an arpeggiated 32nd notes, and it starts about mezzo forte, and it goes to, and suddenly an E flat. Now that major 3rd, I like absolutely to have each note sound the same. And then comes something that is throughout the piece, triplets. So this, then, a little melodic material, then interrupted by, and another triplet, and the sounds accumulate, and then suddenly, but he was always advising, always keep the sound coming, do not have it assault the listener's ear, and you can make a big sound, you can make a strong sound, but you don't have to make a harsh sound. There was a lot of harsh playing, abounding, is that a word? So that is how the piece goes. Now, if you look at the 3rd page, on the 3rd system, you'll see that you have these 32nd, it's an 8th note. Now, there's a G, right? And the melodic line comes in on the E flat. And it's in piano, it's in pianissimo. But he said here, you want the E flat goes to the E natural. And in order to be able to account for the fact that the tone goes away, and you can make that melodic connection, you have to give a little more juice to the E flat. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, where this comes from, it has been an extraordinary experience to go through this, because I remember what he said. It was all new to me, and it has brought me back to studying with Julian. It's been, if for nothing else, this has been really a wonderful time for me to have this reconnection with such an excellent teacher. I don't think there's, I mean, there are no secrets in the piece. I think I should just, I've talked enough. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think my daughter was right.
I just want to say there's only
You
2
would say
pages in our manuscript.
I'm sorry?
There are only 2 pages in our manuscript, Mom, because it's a different printing. So when you say third page, it's actually on the 2nd here. So
Oh,
in case
yes.
people were
Oh,
wondering.
I redid it some years ago on my computer for some reason, I can't remember why. And then it got lost, and then a friend sent it to me from her phone. So it doesn't look very good. But each of you, most of you have a printout of the original manuscript, right? What I have here. It's easy for me to read from this because I'm used to it. That is what composers did then in 1953. And one worked very hard to develop a good hand. Because otherwise people say, I can't read this, I won't play it. So, he wasn't in for many pianistic tricks, but I forgot to tell you, there is this arpeggio. There's 9 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Goes to here. And so he taught me to play it, not to stretch, but instead you play 4 fingers of the left hand, right? You play 4 fingers here. Sorry. And you play 5 with the right hand, but you play 1, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3. How am I doing? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 5, which you can stretch. And then, sorry, it's a B. And then you put your 3rd finger over. Rather than, because if you stretch to that, there's a crescendo here, and if you stretch to that, you really won't get this B. So it's sorry, that's wrong. I'm not going to do it anymore. But you get the point. Yes. And he taught me that because when I went to study with him, well, that will be. When I went to study with him. I didn't, so I went to Columbia University, and then I had a Fulbright that was extended, so it was a 1.5 years in Germany, and I played the piano. I mean, I always played the piano. My original piano teacher was someone who taught adults. He taught adults to play popular music, and I worked with him for 3 years. He did not teach pianism. He just, what it comes down to, especially when I was studying in the early 40s, is what people now call theory, or have always called theory. At any rate, so I did not have any lessons nor practice from the time I was 20 until I was 35. I could play the piano, but not as all of you do. So I discovered, we had, my husband and I had married, and oh, I should say, Julian, I always saw Julian and Margaret when I was in New York. We went out to dinner, we went to concerts, we were very good friends, and they came to my wedding. The families of my husband and me did not. But Julian walked into the judge's chambers and said, "We are here in loco parentis." And indeed, then when my children were born, they considered my children their grandchildren. And my children felt the same. It was very, very close. As I said at the beginning, I knew him from my age 16 until he died. I won't go, the circumstances were such that I started playing the piano when it was nap time for my children every day, an hour and a half, maybe even 2. And after 2 months, I got in touch with him and said, "I'm playing the piano, but I really don't know what I'm doing, and I know I don't know what I'm doing. If you don't know," which I didn't formally, everything's okay, right? So I went to he had a beautiful studio on 68th Street off the Clark, and the most gorgeous piano I've ever played is Steinway C. It's just really beautiful. We discussed what I was going to play, and I said, learn, not play, not play. And I said, well, I always like to have Bach 3-part inventions in the mix. And when I was in Germany, I did have 2 piano lessons with Professor Schröter. And Professor Schröter went to my teacher, who was the director of the Staatliche Hochschule für Musik in Hamburg, and said, "Sie ist unmöglich," which means she's impossible. Because I said to him, why should I learn scales if I'm not playing a piece with scales? And he actually didn't have an answer. That's probably not a good question to ask. So that was it. So back to the repertoire. And Julian said, well, you should play a piece of yours. So I said, okay, I'll learn that sonatina. And not the sonata, I think. I mean, there's also a list of things I've written for the piano, and in your handout, in some handouts. Anyway, I won't describe. And so I said there was one piece. Oh, I wanted to play a piece that Professor Schröter introduced to me, which were the Duport variations of Mozart. And then I said, there's one piece I really love and I would love to play, and it's the Ravel Valse Noble Sentimentale.